Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Today is Thursday, the 27th of April. We'll go straight on to item 1, which is apologies.
Received apologies, Chairman, from Peter Kruskonjic.
And I think everyone else is here. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest for today's meeting, members? No? We'll go straight on to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of March. Are we in agreement that they are a true record? Thank you, David. Can we have a seconder? Graham. Okay, our first substantive item is item 4, which is the household waste recycling centres and the outcome of the public consultation and the policy changes for 23-24. Before I bring Simon Tagg in to introduce this report and to the officers, Clive, it's your last meeting. And I just want to say a massive thank you for the work that you've done for us, the help that you've given me as chairman over the last 2 years. So members, can we just have a round of applause for Clive, who is leaving the authority to retire? I'm sure his wife has got a long list of jobs that need doing. They retire early these days, Graham, yeah. So, Simon, over to you, household waste recycling centres.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just echo your comments there about Clive, and of course I've worked very closely with him over the last couple of years while I've been portfolio holder, and also way back to 2013 when I was a cabinet support member as well at that time. I worked with Clive on bus services and things. So, and also I think this report we're bringing today, which is a culmination of the consultation, is obviously Clive's team have been working tirelessly since we brought in the household waste recycling sites to get them what we want them to be, and that is a residents service. 1.6 million visitors per year we have from the residents of Staffordshire into our household waste recycling sites, and the committee will remember at its a meeting, I think it was in November, this committee agreed for us to go out to consultation on the possibility of a van permitting and vehicle recognition-based system for businesses in Staffordshire. And the outcome of that consultation is now come back to us, and Nick Bentley is going to give us a presentation on the outcome of that for the committee to have a look at, give some views before it goes to Cabinet on the 17th of May. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we start then, Simon's just said a couple of things there, but yes, when we came to, we asked if we could go out to consultation. We got members' delegated decision to do so. Our team worked along with the comms and marketing team and the insight team to devise the actual consultation document to make sure it was all good. We ran it for 7 weeks, from the 5th of December to the 22nd of January, where we set a target of 500 and we actually received over 1,000 responses, 1,002. That was mainly through the online consultation, but we also had people out on site taking results as well. Listed there below is just a few of the headline results for you. If we look on with regard to the responses, you can see we had responses from actually every site. Most people disposed of their household waste or recycling of the residence's material. Very few were trade, there's 0.4%. And the frequency of visits was broadly split between 49% visited once a month or more, and 47% who visited less than once a month. 58% of the respondents were cars, and 22 uses were vans. I think the van usage one is slightly higher because when we had the people on sites, they tended to approach people in vans more because obviously this has had a bigger impact on them. So, what was the views? As you can see there on the right-hand side, over 50% of people thought that 12 permits should be the allowed amount. Van users actually, surprise, surprise, had a higher preference for 12 permits. That's 73% compared to 38% of car users. Regular users of HWRCs once a month or more also expressed the higher preference of 12 permits per year at 63%. And we got respondents from all districts regarding the option for 12 was their preferred one. but there was a big range, 61% in Staffordshire Moorlands and down to 32% in Tamworth. Within the actual consultation, there was a free text comment area, and there's a couple of snapshots of some of the comments we had, the feedbacks, positive impacts. People were saying it would make it quicker and easier for cars using it, reduce queuing at recycling centres, not being held up, stop people trying to use the recycling centres to dump trade waste, discourage traders who were taking advantage of all rate-paying Staffordshire residents. There were also negative comments. It would have a big impact. We have 2 vans in our property. It's their only means of transport. The people thought it would increase fly tipping. What was the result of the commercial trade waste? Well, as you can see on the chart there, 60.2% of people thought it should be Staffordshire businesses only and using all sites apart from Biddulph, which isn't allowed to take it. Quite an interesting point is that second point down. The higher than average support for this was at Cannock Chase and Stafford, which was 73% and 69% compared to the 60%. Now, those of you who went on the guided tour, shall we call it, will remember that both Cannock and Stafford are the busiest sites. And I think that result shows that the residents who are using those, it has a big negative impact on them, and they definitely wanted to move away from the commercial operations. Fly tipping was the main reason given for people saying that they should go to all areas. Okay. So we've had some things with regards to the negative impact on this. So let's have a look at some of the mitigation we can do to get against this. With regard to commercial and trade waste, we're proposing that we have a 2-month amnesty. So when it comes into effect, if traders still come in, we would allow them to tip and dispose the waste and pay for it, but would be informed that they could no longer come back. With regard to van permits, we'll have a clear definition of vehicles and trailers which require a permit. What we also would do is we want to give some enabling power to our staff. If somebody comes on site and they've got in a van and they come along and they've got 2 black bags of waste, we wouldn't expect them to use up a permit. What we'd say there is, you know, it's like a car waste. The van permits is to be used when people come in with a nearly full van. That's the whole idea of this. The other thing as well is that we're not the first to introduce van permitting. It's nearly the norm now. In fact, recently Devon County Council have introduced van permitting. So we're not the first. It's not a route that's unique or unusual. The final thing as well is that we're talking about fly tipping. What we want to do is we will work closely with the districts and borough councils, and looking at fly tipping material, we'll look on a case-by-case basis. We're arranging to try and meet up with the relevant officers to work together to make sure that this runs smoothly. The other thing we have to take into account as well is that charges have been introduced in the past. We've introduced charges at HWRCs for certain materials. Some districts and boroughs have introduced charging for garden waste. All concerns were raised that this would increase fly tipping. There's no evidence supporting that. And the other thing I think I could say here as well is that if somebody is going to fly tip, if we're saying it's outside Staffordshire, if somebody is a business outside Staffordshire and they've got the mindset to fly tip, would they drive from the West Midlands conurbation all the way into Staffordshire to fly tip? The increased costs of the fuel, etc. If they're that type of individual, they're after cash and they want money quick. So what they'll do is they will tip the nearest opportunity from where they work so they can get on to their next job. So what's the potential policy option we're proposing for you to think on? We're thinking 12 permits to be issued to Staffordshire Council residents to be used over 12 months from the date of application. Permits are registered to the resident's home address, not the vehicle. It's applicable to certain vehicles and trailers. It will be an online application, and the proposed implementation is the 1st of September, subject to approval from CELS and obviously Cabinet. We also have to work with a provider and make sure we're fairly confident we can hit that date if approved. We'll give 1 month's amnesty from the date of the changes, even though we will do a comms campaign via the internet and signage on the site, but we'll give a month's amnesty so people realise we have to tip and carry on. And as I said before, with this policy, it's not you come in with one bag in your van, that's a permit used. We are empowering our staff to talk and use common sense where applied. Policy 15, the commercial and trade waste. What we would like is to restrict it to Staffordshire Council businesses only. Trade waste disposal available to all sites, excluding Biddulph, because Biddulph can't take trade waste anyway. We would require evidence to be provided, which would be a paper copy of the waste carrier's licence, which they would have to provide. So we would then see that the address is in the Staffordshire postcode. We'll continue to increase trade waste prices as part of the fees and charges review each year. If passed, we would introduce trade waste restrictions from Monday the 5th of June. And like with the van permits, with the trade, we would have a 2-month amnesty. If somebody came on site, we would allow them to tip, we would charge them, obviously take their address, and they can't come back again if they're a non-Staffordshire registered business. And as I said before, we will work closely with the districts and boroughs with regard to fly tipping, should that arise, but we can't see it occurring. There was another policy that you wanted us to look at, which was not part of the consultation, but that's with the restricted waste for schools, charities and volunteer groups. What we would like to do here is that we'd like to move forward with voluntary groups, charities, organisations such as Scouts being able to apply and get access, easy access to the sites. It would be an application, and what we'd have is 2 officers to sign that application off to make sure it's okay, and then we'd have access allowed to the site. It makes it easier. I know that some people have voluntary groups who do litter picking, and they're reliant on the bags being left and then being picked up by the districts or borough councils to collect. What we'd say is, if those volunteers come to us, we will get the authorisation so that they can go on the sites direct if they want to. If it was a church hall or village hall and they generate waste from a commercial activity, that would still have to be classed as trade commercial waste. Obviously, we've also got a number of other policies which are sitting at the back, which are in the pack. They were last updated in December 2013. What we would do is an internal review to be undertaken, and basically that's to reflect that the services now come in-house and to make sure that they are applicable to the operations as they stand now. Subject to the recommendations of this committee and a cabinet approval, policy to be available from the 5th of June to reflect the changes in commercial trade waste, restricted schools and charities, and all the other policies. And obviously subject to recommendation from yourself again and cabinet approval, policy to be available for the 1st of September for the van and trailer usage. You know me with presentations, and we're in the waste business, and Darryl told me to do it. We have to have a picture of a skip, a bin, so that's standard. You'll always get one of them with us. Just a quick update of some more of the improvements. Obviously, we've bought some more containers. CCTV is now used on all sites. Webcam, we're on the final stages of getting it up and running. We've had a few ICT issues. You saw the burnt wood improvement, the floor. Leak transfer station has now got a new weighbridge. And we're distributing defibrillators to all sites. You might not be aware of this, but since we've taken over the sites, we've had 2 heart attacks on our sites. One was a fatality, and the other person survived. So we want to put them on the sites, but to be honest, we don't want to use them. We've also purchased 2 second-hand JCBs. These are going to be used to help in the reduction in using higher charges. We have a significant number of breakdowns. We want to reduce them. And finally, I would say a picture paints 1,000 words. That was burnt wood before and burnt wood after. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Have any of the other officers got anything to add? Clive? No? Darryl?
Just quickly, I want to say a big thank you to all the staff that have done an amazing job in transforming the service. If you've used the sites in the last year, you'll see how different they are, how much better they are. And that's thanks to Clive, his team, Nick in particular on the ground, but all the crews have really adapted well to the new approach, which I'm really pleased with, because that's what we're here for, is to support our customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Darryl. Graham?
Thank you. A couple of points. In my local one in Lisset in Newcastle, I have to say the service is infinitely better than it was. And when I talked to the staff there, I was talking to them only a few days ago when I dropped some rubbish off. They were very, very happy working for Staffordshire. So, good transformation. I occasionally borrow a trailer to get rid of garden waste. And if I want to take it to one of our recycling centres, would I be classed, how do I not be classed as trade? How do I get classed as a very occasional user?
You'd apply with the van and trailer permit for your home address and that you get 12 permits.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sam?
I've got 3 questions, is that okay? The first one is, you know, you've got the defibs on site. Is it worth having the bleed kits as well on site? Because you're dealing with heavy machinery and it may be that you have someone that chops their hands off or something. Not severe, but you know what I mean. And a bleed kit will help that, won't it? That was just a thought. You fly tipping, you speak about working with the district. I have an issue at the moment with fly tipping in Norton Keynes that I can't get it collected because it's too much and the district can't collect it and the county can't collect it. So it's just sitting in a street. It is an industrial street, but I can't get anybody to move it. So I don't know if that could be looked at by any chance, please. And my third one is, I know I've spoke to Nick about this, about the parish councils. Our parish council has a layman. He's very, very good at helping out with highways work. He clears paths, he cuts hedges back, he goes on roundabouts and clears the edgings. But we struggle with the waste. And I have spoke to Nick about it before. So is that included in with the community centres and things like that? So that's all lovely. That's right, thank you. I'll give you a shout later.
Just on to back with regard to the large fly tipping, it potentially could be on private land, which might mean that none of us could act. Highways land. We've removed large fly tipping things before, so if you want to get the person in touch with myself with regard to that from your district, we're more than happy to start talking and see how we can sort that out.
Just with regards to the defibs that Sam's mentioned, the bleed kits and the defibs go hand in hand normally, and you have 2 separate boxes side by side. Sam's right, we're dealing with machinery, we don't know what's going to happen, hopefully nothing, but if the bleed kits are there, it's got everything in it to tourniquet and everything else. And when we fitted them in Tamworth as part of the charity that I work for, we put them together, so you've got the bleed kit and the defib in 2 separate cabinets. David.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 things, really. Firstly, from time to time, when I'm coming to meetings at Stafford, I have a prime place for dumping. And if I report that to the district council, then by the time I come back from Stafford, it's gone. They are absolutely excellent at clearing up fly tipping. But can I just question again the point that you made about there not being any evidence that people are coming from outside Staffordshire to dump? I mean, I have a border that is with Walsall Metropolitan and also Birmingham City. The large amount of waste that we get dumped is almost entirely from Walsall, and that's not really conforming with what you were saying in your presentation.
I'll come back on that one if I could. I think existing fly tipping problems across border are already existing. I think what Nick is talking about is the result of the changes which we're proposing, which we believe will not increase those fly tipping issues. And if there is any increases, there is obviously a case-by-case basis where we work with districts particularly to resolve those problems. I think one of the things, I mean, there's always the issues of as has come through with this consultation about increases in fly tipping. We saw it when, as Nick said earlier, about when councils moved to garden waste collections. I remember in Newcastle we had the opposition really going really strong on the fact that if we brought in garden waste collections, that would lead to fly tipping across the board. In the year following the introduction, fly tipping actually fell within the borough. Unusual, but it fell. I'm not saying that's a result of garden waste collections, that's just the ups and downs of the way we collect our stats, but it certainly did not increase. And then also when the county many years ago brought in charges for the rubble and the other stuff, there was no discernible increase in fly tipping then neither. So I think it's something which we're aware of, it's something which Nick has got in his proposals to address if it has arisen. But I think it's always a fear that comes out of any changes that we make to our recycling sites that there will be a resulting fly tipping increase. But I think what you're talking about there, David, is already happening, isn't it? And those border areas is potentially a place where people are coming over the border and dumping stuff presently without even us changing the arrangements we're making at the moment. I think the key priority is for our residents. It continues to be free to bring the materials in. It's just if you've got vans, you need a permit, isn't it? You can dump 12 times a year. And that commercial waste, let's just remember, Chair, is that most councils don't allow commercial waste into their sites anyway. We're one of the only councils that do so. To control that through the scheme which has been put forward, I think is a sensible move. And also, as I said earlier, prioritises for our residents here in Staffordshire, which of these are household waste recycling centres, not business waste centres. Thank you.
Bernard?
Thank you, Chairman. Fly tipping, of course, is everybody's problem. And when you consider when we went on that visit to the different areas, then there was one potential fly tipper there because he wouldn't pay to have the load taken out. Now, I've thought about this and I thought, well, surely if that's a potential fly tipper, how many more potential fly tippers do we turn away? And it's possible, obviously, that if, just a little example, if you could spray those people who bring in some rubbish, whereby you would be able to recognise it if you refuse to have it on site, then you could pick it up, possibly, if it's fly tipped. So there's got to be different ways that we can try to establish who has created the fly tipping, because some of them, they're obviously people who do it regularly because they get paid for it. And we need to look at our own system and say, how can we try to stop those people who think they can come in and fly tip a load of rubbish, cost for nothing, and just make a nice fortune out of it. I mean, there's obviously different ways. You could photograph it, you could find a little item on there that is recognisable at any time, and just little things that we can do ourselves to assist in the problem of finding out who is doing the fly tipping.
I think, as Nick said earlier, we do have people coming in from outside the county to use our sites. That's always happened, isn't it? And I think what he suggested is the amnesty period, so that when these changes are brought in, they're not enforced immediately. So you have somebody coming in from Solihull or something, or over in the West Midlands, which we saw, I think, when we were at Cannock. They would come, be aware of all the signage, be aware of the advice they're getting from our officers that if you come again, you will not be able to come into this site. So, as Nick quite rightly says, they are not going to come that 20 miles or wherever, with fuel costs being very expensive, to bring their waste here. And if they are going to fly tip, they're going to fly tip near to where they picked up their material, which will be in the West Midlands or in another authority. So I think I think you can be reassured that this isn't coming in as a dead stop. This is coming in as a period for people to get used to the idea of this, particularly businesses, and hopefully they will amend their behaviour and take their waste elsewhere, closer to where they are actually picking it up, which if they come from outside the county. But for Staffordshire businesses, we have a system where they can use our sites, and that's what we're proposing here in these proposals, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Philippa.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions as well. With regards to the green wastes, our district council are going to be charging, which is standard, but I'm just wondering if they have 12 permits and are used to doing lots of green recycling, will they be able to apply for extra permits if they need to, or can they pay for extra ones rather than them having nowhere to put their green waste? And with regards to the month's amnesty, I know that you said you're going to be writing to the address that they provide, but will we also be taking a recording the registration of the vehicles? Because if you're in a business, a lot of people swap vehicles as well. And what else was my other one? Oh, with regards to your policy 14, access to the site and the authorisation process, I know you need 2 officers, but how long is that process likely to take? Because some of the community groups get in touch with us on a Friday and say we're doing a litter pick on the Sunday, and then we've got the waste to get rid of on the Monday. How quick will that process turn around? Thank you.
First one with regard to the green waste, they can have 12 permits, they use the 12 permits. If they've got another, we're not stopping cars, so if somebody's got both a car and a van, they can use the 12 permits for the van when they're doing big clearances, and then go back to the car and use the boot for the small ones. If that's not applicable, then yes, they can pay for the disposal of the waste if they want to. The other question you had with regard to how long it will take, we've got a process inside, and it will take a matter of 1 day, 2 days tops, the way we're thinking we're going to do it.
And the registration numbers, will that be recorded as well?
When you apply for your van permit, one of the boxes you have to complete in is your vehicle registration number. That will be then used as part of the checks when they come on site with the operatives to make sure they all match.
Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, whenever there's any change, significant change, people will get things wrong, people will argue. And obviously, there's the potential there for conflict at the site. So what training are staff getting in terms of dealing with that sort of conflict? Is there CCTV at all the sites so that obviously any conflict can be recorded so that the staff are protected? But I do think it's important that we do think about the people at the front line, because I know that when, for instance, a district insisted on having, a particular form of payment, that created conflict, and it's not fair that the staff should bear the brunt of a policy which has been made by ourselves. So I just really want to make sure that staff at all times do have the complete support of the County Council in doing what they have to do on our behalf.
Just to advise, yes, all sites have got CCTV. We've also issued out body cams, which we've got the lads starting to be trained on to make sure we've got all the systems in place to be right. We've also got one of our operatives, actually in the past, was what's the best way of putting it? A front doorman, shall we say, and has been trained to handle conflict in certain ways, and he is going to be going out and giving training to all the staff as well. So we want to support and protect the staff as best we can, and with CCTVs and body cams and a bit of training, we think we're going the right way.
I appreciate that we're probably talking about both male staff and possibly male perpetrators, and in that situation it can be a difficult mix.
I think also, just to follow up what Nick has said, also in his presentation he pointed out that obviously the staff will be given some leeway as these, it's not a hard stop, it's not a hard start, I suppose is the word, better than a stop. They will be given, I think one of the things we've tried to do since we've taken these sides on is empower the staff, get them involved in shaping the service as well. And I think they will have that sort of, but be backed by the County Council and what they do, but be given that, issue by issue, case by case basis to say, well, okay, bring that in this time, but you do know from the next time, these rules will apply. So that should really cut down on some of that potential conflict, which you're quite right, Charlotte. We've seen that as changes are brought in across these sites. But I would say if the guy's wearing his dark sunglasses, as the one we're talking about, he's nobody will mess with him because they're quite a strong bunch of lads which are working now for the County Council for the betterment of the people of the county, and have got very great confidence that they can deliver a really improved service and a better service going forward.
In some ways, if they've got leeway, that it, in fact, creates more of a problem, because if people know that there's leeway, then, obviously they can be pressurised and saying, come on, you've got leeway, you've got the choice. So, I think we just have to, I think in some circumstances it can certainly help, but in other circumstances it could actually put a lot of pressure on the individual.
Yeah, these are policies that we're bringing in which, there might be some conflict. There's conflict going on sites every day. It's something that the staff are well used to. People argue black is white sometimes. Bags of rubble, that's a bag of rubble. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. So they've handled this type of conflict and these issues for a long time, and confident they'll be able to handle this just the same.
Thanks, Nick. Are there any further comments or questions? Go on then, Sam.
Can I just say thank you to Nick and his team, because I know, working around Cannock area, that we have had a lot of issues in the site, mainly with retail people coming into the site and not being able to tip when they're local people. So it is really appreciated that this is being put in place, and I know Nick, I've spoke to Nick a few times about it, that I'm not surprised. But I do really appreciate it, and I do think the residents will appreciate to be able to see that something's been listened to, that people have took on board what their comments are. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. You kind of stole my thunder there. Obviously, we've got 4 recommendations today, but I just want to say that I'm really pleased that this report has been put together by Nick and his team after we've done the tour and after listening to what we had to say, because we did pick up on a couple of issues whilst out on site. And again, you've listened to us, you've put that in the report, and that's what it's all about. That's what good scrutiny looks like. I'm really pleased that we've got the bit in about voluntary groups, because that's really important for me, I'm a volunteer litter picker, so I've got a bag of rubbish. What do I do with it? And when I go out, I take 2 bags, so I've got recycling in one and rubbish in the other, and then long arms by the time I get back to the house. So we have a lot of voluntary groups across the whole of Staffordshire. That's going to be really, really pleasing. And as Sam's just said, this is going to be a pleasing report, and the changes coming in will affect the residents, but in a good way. You're going to have the few negatives, but I think with the month's grace and our team on site, it's going to work. There'll be a few comments about the price changes, I'm sure, but again, they will get used to it the same as they got used to the bin charges and everything else. What else was I going to say? Yeah, I think that was it, actually. So if there are no further comments or questions, we've got 4 recommendations, and if you're happy that I move them on block rather than read them all out. Thank you, David. Can we have a seconder, please? Philip? So those are moved, and I thank you for your work. Thank you for the tour of the sites, because it did help. It gave us a better impression of what was going on, especially at the Cannock and Stafford sites, which were really, really busy. So thank you. And thank you again to Clive. Enjoy your retirement, and no doubt we'll see you somewhere around Staffordshire. Thanks very much. So we'll move on to item 5, which is Simon again, which is flood risk management strategy update.
Thank you, Chair. A varied agenda today. Members will be aware at a previous meeting we brought the an update for the local flood risk management strategy. The strategy hadn't been updated for a number of years, and we'd had significant storm events, particularly between 2018 and 2022. Also changes to the Environment Agency regulations and national regulations around flood management, which needed to be integrated as well. So the draft strategy was put together, went out to consultation. That consultation has ended now, and Jamie, who's obviously Jamie Cooper, who's been and presented this committee before, is here to report back on the consultation. And I won't steal his thunder anymore and just hand over to do, I believe you've got it's up on the screen there, so off you go, Jamie.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Okay, so as Simon said, it's an update on the flood risk management strategy, essentially. So the background to this, we previously consulted yourselves in 2022 on the draft strategy. Now, there's something just to bear in mind that's happened since then. In January, February this year, the government have announced that we're likely to take on Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, which is quite a big change. What that means is that effectively we'll become a SUDS approval body, responsible for the approval, adoption and maintenance of SUDS features, so these are drainage features. This has already happened in Wales, and in Wales they apply anything that's over one property or 10 metres squared through the planning process needs to go for this SUDS approval body. So it's quite a big change. It's a bit like highways in the sense that they do planning and then they have a highways adoptions team, but this will be for drainage. So we expect that there'll be a further update to the strategy in 23-24, given this implication, especially on resourcing and financing. So, background to the strategy, just quickly. This was originally intended for December 22 publish. As I've said about Schedule 3, that was delayed. It was supposed to be in autumn 22. That came in January, February. And we've also gone out to a wider public consultation. That consultation has got 4 strands, at least for this presentation, which is the first bit is about Cabinet approval. So we've gone to Cabinet for approval. We've sought consultation from professional partners. The key thing is we've gone out for a wide public consultation, and we've also published some supplementary environmental reports. So here's a summary of the consultation. So it went to Cabinet for approval. Cabinet have approved it given the following conditions. Essentially that it's a draft strategy. We were still going for a public consultation at the time. We'll take on board the comments of that. And also, as I've said, once Schedule 3 comes on board for this SUDS approval body, we'll probably need to do another strategy once we know the implications of that for things like added burdens, processes, guidance, scheduling. So these are the people that were consulted. So we consulted councillors, parishes, districts, other organisations that we work closely with, being a flood team, it's the Environment Agency, water companies, the Sow and Penk Drainage Board, Canals and Rivers Trust. And we also consulted wider strategies, Natural England, Historic England, Trent Rivers Trust, NFU. And then there was also obviously comms through the website and social media. So, professional partners came back. This is the feedback that we got. Environment Agency and Severn Trent Water had minor comments, which we'll take on board. And the NFU made some points about voluntary arrangements, natural flood management, SUDS, these drainage features and engagement, which we'll take on board. This is the key thing, I think, because this is really interesting. This is the public consultation, which was run in February 2023 to a wider audience. Several questions asked, and the following slides will summarise this. It's quite technical thing, but I'll whiz through it just to give you the background. So, 93 respondents, 83% of which were Staffordshire residents. The first question that we asked them was, to what extent do you agree or disagree with our vision for managing flood risk? About 80-odd% agreed, and 7% disagreed with that. And then we had a series of objectives within the draft strategy, which we asked for feedback on. And this is the feedback. So understanding flood risk and being prepared is the first one. 93% agreed, 5% disagreed, sorry, 2% disagreed. Objective 2, managing flood risk and new development. Again, quite a high number, so we got sort of 85%. I think that's, 85% agreeing and about 5-6% disagreeing. Objective 3, securing funding for flood alleviation schemes and working with partners. Again, we've got about 88% agreeing, 3% disagreeing. Objective 4, ensuring communities are more aware, informed and resilient to flooding. This is probably the biggest change. We've got a much bigger focus on communities now. And again, a high number agreed and about 7% disagreed with that objective. This is probably one of the most interesting slides. Which, of the objectives, which do you think is the most important to achieve? And this is the feedback that we got, okay? So, of the 5, the 2 that stood out were, the first one was managing flood risk and new development, and also effective management of drainage and flood defence assets. Now, there's a bit of misunderstanding, I'd say, with the flood risk management and development, because a lot of the comments are about floodplain, which is managed by the Environment Agency. That's not the local flood risk management team. We look at surface water drainage for the things, so that skewed the number quite a bit. But also effective management and drainage and flood defence access. It's quite a bit in there about highways. And again, we work quite closely with highways on lots of flood incidents, but that reinforces that point of collaboration, etc. The others were fairly standard. So we then asked, what do you think is the biggest challenge and opportunity for the County Council in achieving our vision and objectives? This was an open question, so we got lots of answers, and we tried to do some categorisation for these. So the biggest one was about planning. Again, development in the floodplain is more on the Environment Agency, but also SUDS and what we do with making water quality better, which was interesting. The second one was about funding and resources. Funding for schemes and staff. But again, most of our schemes are externally funded. So we get quite a lot of funding from national flood defence granting aid and a regional local levy. That's where we get the funding in. And with the staff, we've also secured about £6 million recently to do what we've called a FAIR project that I'll come on to, which gives us the ability to have some more staff. Okay, so we've got around that by externally getting funding. And the next one up was highways issues, highways maintenance and schemes. And again, that's obviously going to come up in a flood risk management consultation, which we'll work with highways on. And then it was more about this engaging and forming with parishes and communities kept cropping up. So I think one of the things that we'll take on board is to really engage with parishes, perhaps do some leafleting and let them know who we are and what we do. And then a lot there on partnership working, natural flood management, and scheme work, which was expected. Are there any other actions that you think we should include? The top of these one was engaging communities, and the FAIR project, which I'll come on to at the end, is one of our biggest targets now, to engage with communities. The way we do that was suggested through leafleting and informing people about flooding, who we are, what we do, who else they need to contact. And then again, it was about engaging the parish. We'll do that. Highways maintenance cropped up, better comms, and website and social media. I think there's a big comms thing here about, raising awareness, which we've taken on board. Are there any other actions that you think should be included? And if so, what do you think they are? So highways maintenance came out on top. Again, we're working with highways on those factors where we can. Engagement cropped up, which will be covered by this FAIR project. Floodplain development, perhaps we need to work a little bit closer with the Environment Agency. We do that, but I think, given that it was so high, it's probably suggesting, it's a priority for people. And then again, partnership working, planning, I think there's one thing to say about the planning. We actually have a SUDS handbook, which developers have to follow when they put new development in. That's really quite stringent, so it really enforces that, making sure that the development's safe in flood risk and not affecting anyone else. Planting trees was interesting, and we're working with the environment team at the moment to see what opportunities there are for schemes to plant trees, because obviously it takes up water. And then some other things here about sustainable solutions. Pollution came up a few times. Obviously, this is a big thing now with water companies and the storm sewer overflows going into watercourses. And I think we've got to draw a line because Ofwat and the Environment Agency regulate that. But I think we can certainly take it on board when we do flood investigations, what that means. If there's foul flooding in people's homes, it's a bigger issue than just clean water. And the last one I'd say was residential impermeability. This idea that people's drives and backyards are being paved over. So that's something that we'll try and tackle. I think it's probably more of a planning issue, but we'll tackle that. So we also consulted on environmental supporting documents. The Environment Agency raised concern over one of them, which is strategic environment assessment. So we have a meeting with those in May to discuss that. Natural England and Historic England have also given us some recommendations, which we'll take on board. So, to summarise, we'll take on board the recommendations, especially about the priorities, disseminating and engaging with professional partners and communities, pollution and flood risk. We'll engage with planners in the Environment Agency about impermeable areas in the floodplain, and also work and continue to work with highways and strengthen that relationship where we can assist. Meet with the Environment Agency on the strategic board assessment and way forward. Publish this as an interim strategy, and then we'll do a full update to the strategy once this SABWOL and Schedule 3 comes on board. Now, one thing we did mention, which within the consultation, was that we'd like to put our schemes as live documents on the website. And the reason for that is so that people can see, what's actually going on. We don't have a static document. We can actually update it as it flexes. So that's the suggestion there. There's a lot of schemes in here, but it's really just to see whether you're okay with, the presentation of the table as it is. So just to give you an outline, so what we've got is all the schemes, who we're working with, the properties that we'll protect, the study start year, and the partners that we're working with. So these are completed schemes that we've done in the last 2 years. 88 properties better protected and secured. Well, we've had £1.7 million funding for that. And then these will be so these are the proposed schemes. It's difficult to see that, but if I can just explain what they are. So there's a scheme name, the location, the properties that we'll better protect, the funding that we've got, the study or strategy that we're starting in, the delivery year, and the partners that we're working with. And you can see there we've got quite a detailed programme. That will change. It will also probably increase. But at the moment, we're looking at 723 properties better protected and about £15.5 million of funding to help do that. Lastly, I just wanted to give you an update. One of the things that kept coming through this consultation was all about communication and engagement. And we've secured £5.7 million of funding from DEFRA to work with the Black Country and Stoke Council from 2022 to 2027, which is all about community engagement and innovation as well. This is it in a nutshell. We've got two approaches. One is kind of a generic approach across the whole of the area. And for that, we want a better website. Bless you. A better website with live and static information on there. So residents can go on if there's a flood and they can see rainfall alerts going on there. They can see what's happening in their area. If there's warnings that we can give, they can go onto the website and see what's happening, and they can get information that they need. Tied to that, we're also going to trial whether it's possible to do an improved phone infrastructure. This might be difficult because all the calls in a flooding event come all at once. But we want to give that. One of the things that's coming out is for flooding, you haven't really got one single point of contact. There's loads of different organisations, and if you flood for the first time, you might not know who to call. So that's the point of that. And then also forecasting and warning for surface water which has not been done in the country before. So we're going to trial that on a few areas, see how that goes. And then lastly, some really innovative stuff on machine learning and artificial intelligence linked to trash screens. If you imagine there's a watercourse and there's a trash screen there, we'll have a camera pointing at it. And if it blocks, artificial intelligence will learn whether that's a real blockage and then send an alert to the people that it needs to be. You know, it could be the community or engineers that need to look at that. So that's the kind of generic approach. And then we've also got a targeted approach to communities most at risk of flooding that we haven't already put a scheme in for. And for these, we've done an assessment of different communities at risk. We've got a whole toolkit of different options that we could, you know, we could deliver on the ground working with communities to that expert community interface. And we've also got funding for small-scale interventions. So, you know, anything that we can do co-design with those communities, we can actually get out and do it. So the sort of things are like, you know, if you've got barriers that you put across your gates, perhaps we could have a storage area, a community building where we keep those and the community has a plan. And then if they get the warning from the website that there's going to be rain, they can take those barriers. There's a few people that have keys and they can all ensure that they're protected rather than relying on, you know, individuals to do that if on holiday. That's that. And then progress on that. So we've secured the funding for that. We've got a team in place. It's a skeleton team at the moment. There's a couple of posts to go through. We've also got a strategic board in place on that, working with the partners, universities, charities, different districts, Environment Agency. We've procured a consultant to do the fancy stuff on the website and telecoms and things like that. We're looking for an essential website in the summer. And currently we've started working what we call quick win communities where we can get some actions on the ground. And lastly, the artificial intelligence stuff. The University of Reading are leading on this and they've looked at about 56,000 images and they're getting about a 95% success rate of determining whether it's a true blockage or not. And there'll be a paper coming out on that. So it's looking quite promising, you know, to give that warning to residents, especially where there's a risk of blockage. That's pretty much it, thank you. So.
Thanks, Jamie. Are there any questions? Sam?
Can I ask, you know, when you said you did your consultation, did you go to Norton Keynes at all? I know you've got it on there for the Brook and Burntwood Road, but we do have a lot of flooding in Norton Keynes. It's a flood risk area more so, and I think you'd get a lot of feedback from the residents of Norton Keynes. I just wondered if you actually sent your consultation out to them.
So the consultation has gone out to the districts and parishes, and we have worked with Norton Keynes community. So it would have gone to them via the normal links. So hopefully we've got some feedback. I think there was some feedback from...
I do know that Andrew Brent is working there at the moment, and he has got funding for the flooding at the library, but we also have a lot of flooding around the area on the edges of Norton Keynes, and I just wondered if that was taken into account at all.
Yeah, so that's one of the library that we've got is actually one of those communities that we've got in the FAIR project. And obviously that's part of Norton Keynes, and I think there's a wider scheme in Norton Keynes to deal with the wider issues, because I think there's some issues that will be best dealt with by the community funding approach and some that will be more traditional funding. And we've got a balance of both there. Yeah.
Can I just ask one more question? Sorry. I bet you regret asking me to come on here, don't you? When you talk about highways, a lot of the problems with flooding on highways is down to the blocked drains because they're just running. Is that just a staffing issue or rather than something bigger?
I think one of the key things to bear in mind is that there's a lot of historic drainage systems that we've inherited, you know, for tens, hundreds of years in some cases. You know, so there's an ongoing issue with that. It's also important to bear in mind that there's kind of like it's a system. Okay, so a lot of the time the gullies go to a smaller pipe, which then connect to a sewer. So it really depends on what's happened in those circumstances. I know we've done quite a lot of work through highways on gully prioritisation and stuff now, but that water then goes into a sewer system. So the problem with these drainage systems is that you can't see it. You know, so it's the obvious, but it goes from a gully into a smaller pipe into those sewers. So it's really about partnership working, you know, and finding out which bit is actually the issue. It could be something further down that's causing the problem. It might not be the obvious stuff. The other thing to say is that gullies, you know, when you get a really big flood, they can only take a small amount of water. So they can't drain all of that water. So when you get sort of these bigger 10, 20, 30-year return periods that we've seen, it helps. But it's not the panacea to solve that issue, because it's, you know, when we get those bigger floods, when we get property flooding, it's really about, you know, capacity issues, and gullies are not the answer to that.
Graham.
Thank you. It mentions ditch management, and some landowners don't care. I know one specifically who doesn't care, and there's regularly a flood on a road, not in my patch, but near where I live. And is there any way we can send a digger into his field and dig the ditch out to make sure that the drainage works properly and doesn't affect all the people that use those highways?
Yeah, there are lots of these issues around the county. So I guess it's a question of, you know, trying to prioritise which ones we've got to look at. You know, some of the things that we take on board in the flood team is whether there's property flooding downstream, and then highways will obviously take on board the category of the road and the frequency and the impact of it. So the short answer is you can. You know, the best way to do it is to landowners have a responsibility. So it's not the counties. You know, landowners have a responsibility to look after their watercourses, their riparian duties. So a lot of the time I think it's a lot about informing people to make them aware that they have actually got to do this. We had a change in, you know, in farming and etc. So I think a lot of it's about informing. You know, the enforcement thing takes a lot of resources. It's heavy. So what we do is we tend to work with those farmers and, you know, inform them what's going on and what their duties are. Then we can enforce as appropriate if needed.
Philip?
Yeah, flooding affects me both as a borough councillor and as a county councillor. In Marchington, the only place it doesn't get flooded is the church, because it's on the highest ground. And so it's important that we do look at planning, and we do make sure that we look at the floodplaining, because it's quite obvious in Marchington that water comes down from the woodlands through the village of Marchington and then out to the River Dove. So if we don't get the planning right, we then get flooding. There's positive things in Marchington, is the fact that we have our flood wardens, which were signed off by the county council, and they come into action when we need it. We've got some floodgates at the pub. You know, there's a brook that goes through Marchington, and the Environment Agency has been out and dug deeper channels and changed the bridge there. So that's relieved a lot of flooding, so that's very positive. The negative things that I find as a county councillor and as a borough councillor is our roads and gullies. Now, I had a problem in Utoxeter a few weeks ago where water was cascading down the road. Residents were up in arms. So I went out and investigated it myself. And basically, it was 5 of our drains were full to the brim with solid mess. So, unfortunately, my highways guys got the drainage people out. And once we cleared those drains, and they were solid, it was nothing to do, problem relieved. So what I think we need to do is that we need to work with highways to make sure that when they go out to do our gullies, that we need to look at the timeliness of when they're emptied. I'm assured that this particular road is cleaned once a year. Well, obviously that isn't enough, because it's an A road. There's some building development going on around the corner, and I'm sure that a lot of the traffic that's going in and out of there is dropping a lot of debris on the road that's now washing into our drains and filling them solid. So we need to look at the timeliness of when we're going out and empty our gullies. I noticed in the highways programme that there's more money now going into emptying gullies, But I really think that we need to look at it, because that's what's causing all our problems, is the gullies are full. But we need to get them emptied, and it took a couple of hours and problem was solved. So that's my main, and it's highways that we have on the Marchington Road as well. There's been traffic lights there now for over a month. We need to get that problem sorted out ASAP. I know Philip Atkins is onto it, but we've still got a gully problem there where it floods the roads, and that's what residents get up in arms about. And so it's timeliness in planning and getting it done as soon as we can. Thank you.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I think what residents find most frustrating when there's a flooding issue is they'll go to Severn Trent, or they'll go to Highways, or they'll go to someone else, and everyone says, not my problem, Gov. And does this mean that the county council will take a lead role in finding out what the problem is? Because, when people have a flood, they go into sort of crisis mode, and finding that nobody will take responsibility is deeply frustrating. And it's absolutely necessary that the biggest, organisation in the mix should take control and should be able to say, okay, we'll find out what the problem is. Does this new arrangement mean that the county council will be taking on that role? Because I think that people get deeply frustrated that everybody's saying, it's not my problem, it's someone else's problem. And it needs someone, the adult in the room, as it were, to say, we don't know what the problem is, but we'll identify what the problem is and get the particular agency to sort it out. So what will change from that scenario with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're a lead local flood authority as the county council, so that we are a lead flood authority, and we have under the Floods and Water Management Act, there's something called Section 19, which enables us to carry out investigations to find out which, they're called risk management authorities, so Severn Trent Environment Agency, etc. Which risk management agency has it?
They're more concerned about managing their own risk, i.e. their financial risk, rather than the risk to the community.
So, yes, exactly. And so those risk management authorities, we find out which one's got relevant functions. So as we've said, there's a whole drainage system. So there might be gullies. The pipe might be owned by Severn Trent. The ditch might go to a main river, and that'll be overseen by the Environment Agency. So what we do as part of those investigations is to get all the partners together and say, well, we think you've got this function. What is it that you're going to do? We then publish reports on that, and there are some on the website now that say which authorities we think have got relevant functions, and we ask them what they're going to do, and we publish that. We can't regulate what they do. For example, the water companies are regulated by Ofbot. But what we can do is we coordinate to understand what that flooding is and who's actually got responsibility to do what, and then ask them what they're going to do about it. So that's the sort of legal duty, and we've had that for some time. I think the other point, which is probably in there, is about, is this who? And a lot of the time people just don't know, because why would you? If your house floods for the first time, who is it that is the right, body to speak to? And that's what we'll try and address as best we can with this FAIR project, to give people a bit more awareness about the different bodies responsible.
So in the situation with a flood and the resident doesn't know what the cause is, should they then come to the county council? Is that the first point of call? Or will you just say, not our problem, go to Severn Trent, go to Highways, whatever? So how will it actually work on the ground as far as the residents are concerned?
What we want to do is a campaign to reach out to the parishes and to the communities that we know are likely to be affected, to make them aware that they're actually at flood risk, and to inform them about what the likely causes of that flood are. There isn't a duty, as it were, on the council to be the first point of call. But what we're going to try and do is to act as that body and have a website and a phone, if we can have a phone line, great, so that at least they can talk to someone and have an understanding of what might have caused that flooding, and the responsible organisations that they could ring to find out, to point them in the right direction of who they could talk to. If it's not a main river flooding issue, they don't need to speak to the Environment Agency. But if it's a sewer nearby, they probably want to speak to, you know, Severn Trent or United Utilities, and we can pass them on to those contacts. At least they know, you know, who to talk to in the first instance.
Simon.
So ultimately, it's still down to the individual.
Charlotte, I've got other people waiting. I've just called Simon.
Thank you. Just to back up Jamie there, a lot of questions that come in from members are relating to the highway flooding issues, aren't they, and the resultant on property, etc. And just to let members know that there is a regular meeting now with Severn Trent, which James, his team, and David Williams and myself are involved in, where we talk to them, get them around the table and get them to recognise some of the big issues that we have and work together to resolve those. I think also one of the things is ensuring that when they start to dig up roads in areas, they don't then leave it there for 6 months with you know, temporary traffic lights or a big hole in the middle of the road that is causing traffic chaos as well. So I think there is a better relationship now with Severn Trent particularly. I think it's going back to what Jamie said. You know, people come to the county council, don't think it's the first port of call, but there are many agencies that are involved, and we have a role to bring them together to solve the issue. And if we need to get funding for bigger flooding schemes, we're part of the flooding levy organisation, aren't we? Where we brought a lot of money into the county over the years for big flooding schemes, which we've seen the result of in Stafford, in Burton, and in other areas. So I think we've got a good track record of delivering those big schemes when a problem's been identified. You know, residents have been involved in providing a solution. Environment Agency involves Severn Trent and the council to solve an issue, get the money in there, do the scheme, and then you know, that one is sorted. But there's always other flooding issues that come up, and there's going to be more as climate change kicks in. And we do, you know, we talk about those. I think Jamie talked about those once in 10, 20, 30-year events. We have those 3 times a year now, don't we? It's you know, the rain is increasing, and the actual sort of amount of rain we have in flash floods, for example, has increased, and this strategy is able to adapt to enable us to deal with that and fight some of those new issues as they come along.
Yeah, exactly that. I'd just like to add that, you know, we do engage with those communities when we've got flooding. We've now got alarm systems, which tells us where the water's mostly hit, and we have maps that show us where the areas likely to flood are. We also go through social media to see where the areas effective are, and the news. We work with partners, so we try to get that ground truthing, and, you know, wherever we get that flooding, we try and prioritise where we can visit so that we can at least get on the ground and talk to people and issue questionnaires. So there is that as well. This is just additional to what we do.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. So, some of the things I've got are repetition of what other people have raised, but I would particularly make the point that I represent a rural area, and so I have a bigger area with a lot of problems. I would particularly follow up on the point that Graham made about ditches. My understanding is that the council now has greater powers to enforce the clearance of ditches. I mean, I think that bad drainage through into ditches is half the cause of the potholes that we have. So solve one problem and you solve the other one. I have in my division, and I suspect other members in exactly the same way, have great problems of who's responsible for something. Now, I have an issue, without wanting to bring it specifically to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but I have water running into somebody's front garden, into their drive, into their garage, and potentially into their house. Now, the county is saying, not us, it's coming off parish land. The parish says, not us, it isn't ours. The Severn Trent say it's not them. Everybody then all argues against whose responsibility it is, while we as members, our concern is for the person who's been flooded. And so I think that the problems of whose problem is it gov. I mean, I had a house that was flooded with neat sewage, and Severn Trent, refusing to accept responsibility for it, said it was the county, said it was everybody else. The member finds themselves in that situation, actually making the inquiries with all the individual service providers, where we probably don't have the speed or the expertise to make that challenge. Ultimately, Severn Trent did decide it was their responsibility, that the whole system in this particular area was faulty, and did something about it. But when just looking at planning generally, I think that we have got to address at some stage the use of water. We look at these massive sheds that have been built, and how are we actually more effectively disposing of that water? We claim that we're going to be looking at a water shortage, yet we're having it running off in thousands of gallons off roofs. No planning, not even local planning for housing, and I see a tremendous amount in Lichfield, has got a scheme where it's looking at a grey water scheme. Unless we address the total use of water and how we apply those concerns, I don't think that we're going to be addressing fully the problems of flooding. And I would just emphasise at the end, I don't know how we did the consultation, but if it was done through parish council websites, I think it's a waste of time, because nobody looks at my parish council website. Thank you, Chairman.
Bernard.
Thanks, Chairman. Following on where David's gone, really, I'll say this about flooding. There are different instances of flooding, particularly in my area, where there's 7 villages, really, that I look after. And when I listen to other people's areas, they seem to have far more serious flooding problems than I have. But I do have flooding problems, and again, coming off fields, generally speaking, but not all of them. My suggestion is that, like potholes, sorry about that word, we ought to have a classification for flooding, whereby the serious areas of flooding need to be tackled first, and we need to understand that. And as I see it now, and listening to everyone else, I think that could work, in as much as the other thing we could do is put slow signs in areas where water crosses roads. Now, people will not slow down. That is one big problem. And I'm always told that there's going to be an accident because you're having to plough through the water. But they won't slow down. So maybe slow signs on these classified areas could be a good idea, so that people, they go through without a problem. So I think if I leave that thought with us, shall we have a classification on flooding whereby we could say add to it with slow signs where we need to add slow signs? Then, you know, is this a good idea, or would it not work? I think it would. Thank you, Chairman.
Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Jamie, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet you've got there of the various schemes. There's 723 properties on there. And I'm just wondering, is that, as you feel, at the full extent of the issue, or do we have a feel for how many houses and properties are actually at risk of flooding in Staffordshire that we are under our remit? And the reason I ask that is that we're talking about publishing this list on the website, which I think is fantastic, so people can see what's happening, and you can see that organically shifting as the schemes get ticked off and new schemes fall on. But the risk is there's 723 people there that will see that they're being solved, and then there's another group of people saying, what about me? Why are these people being prioritised over and above me? So have we got a feel of the extent of the problem we've got to deal with? What would be the potential cost for that? And is there a separate programme behind this which will fall into this schedule of activities moving forward? Thank you.
Yes, so there's 2 things for this. The first one is we did a communities at risk vulnerability assessment to understand the key communities that are at risk. We split that down into rural and urban areas, so we've got that. And then there's also the fact, of course, that there's different forms. So the Environment Agency will put a scheme in, where it's main river flooding, and we will put a scheme in where it's surface water flooding or groundwater or ordinary water course. So there's a bit of separation as to who's the lead organisation. But yes, we do have that information. And the second thing is it's also prioritised based on what's flooded as well. You know, so if we've had a recent flood event, we'll want to, you know, put that scheme in above one that's perhaps more proactive. You know, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking. So there is a, you know, we have got that assessment done, and there is a recommendation in there as well to further refine that as part of this strategy, so that we've got a better, you know, prioritisation matrix.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with that, and I understand that clearly there'll be a prioritisation within that. But just getting back, do we have a number, do we think, of how many other properties that we're going to have to deal with? And I get the prioritisation process, but if you're the person that's had someone else's toilet paper in your front room, you don't care about the prioritised process. You want to know when you're going to be mitigated, when's your issue going to be resolved. So how do we communicate that, and how do we better educate people in terms of, and making them understand that they're still in this, they're still being dealt with, but they may be a little bit further down, and how do we justify that to them as an individual sitting there with water in the front room?
We can certainly provide some numbers. I think the key thing to bear in mind is that there's risk categories, you know, so, and it's probability of flooding. So it's depth of flooding and probability of flooding. And what we want to make sure is that it's clear that, you know, with the ones that flood frequently every few years are obviously going to be a higher priority than those that perhaps at risk of a 1,000-year flood, for example.
Philippa?
Thank you. Mine's not that in-depth question, really. It's just with regards to appendix, I think it's 1B. On your action plan tables, you've got your status, established, continued. But on there at the timescale, some of them just say things like ongoing. It would be really useful if we knew when you were going to be reviewing the ongoing work, because it might not actually be working, or it's finished already and we've not seen that information. So if that could be added onto the report for us in future or provided to us, I think that would be really helpful.
I think it can. I'll have a look just to make sure there's anything fundamental, but I think it can. Thanks.
Sam?
Sorry, mine's really simple as well. You know, when you're looking to buy a new house and you want to know where it is or whether it's a flood risk, is there anything on the county council list that would give that person that opportunity? It's on the what, sorry?
Environment agency.
No, but I was thinking...
Every time I bought a house, make sure I don't buy in a floodplain.
Yeah, I was just thinking that with this, what you're doing here, maybe there's something you could incorporate with it there so people can just see the areas. I know.
Yeah, I think that's right. The Environment Agency is where you get those maps to show you whether it's at surface water flood risk or river flood risk. I think the key thing about the website is we're going to function it. What I'd like to see is that it's based on who's going to be on there. So the first list at the top will be who are you. You know, so if you're a resident or a developer or, you know, someone else with an interest in flooding, you can direct them to what the problem is. So that's how I'd like it to work, is more about who's attending the website, you know, so that you can answer that question. I'm a home buyer, and some guidance maybe on that.
Simon?
Yeah, thank you. Just to point out on the last page of the strategy, there is the other relevant documents. There's a whole wealth of information there about surface water management plans, strategic flood assessments for level 1 and level 2, covering all of the districts. So you can really drill down into the information for your division in there, see what the risk is, see what the history is, and see what sort of priority is being given to some of the problems that have happened in the past and what might be coming down the line with climate change. And those Jamie, are also being updated as well, aren't they, constantly to reflect the changing situation and new problems that come along.
Thank you, Simon. Jamie, can you just answer what work we're doing with Canals and Rivers Trust? Because quite often we see that there might be a blockage in one part of the river, for example, where in Tamworth we've got two rivers meet. And sometimes you'll see that the blockage is where the weir comes down, so that in effect is stopping the water from moving, which obviously means it's going to back up somewhere else. So what work do we do with them to ensure that they're keeping their end of the bargain?
Yeah, we do work with Canals and River Trust. It's not one of the major partners that we deal with because it tends to be ad hoc. You know, it's really the water companies, Environment Agency, Town Penk, IDB and the districts that we tend to work with most. But certainly where there is an issue, we will liaise with Canals and Rivers Trust, and, you know, it's their asset. So what is the plan to, you know, to unblock it, essentially?
Thank you. So again, we've discussed this in quite depth. I'm really pleased that we're going to be working closer with planners and developers because Tamworth again is a floodplain, but we still have developers that want to build houses on it. And I'm really pleased that the answers that you've given to the very comprehensive questions this morning. We've got 2 recommendations this morning to consider and make any further recommended changes and to support the publication of the live flood schemes. I think we're all in agreement that those live flood schemes are a good idea to the County Council's flood risk management website. So we're all in agreement with those 2 recommendations. Thank you. And thank you, Jamie, for your time and your this morning and the report. And we'll move on. Thank you. So I'll put my microphone on. Item 6 is the Advisory Council on Religious Education, the SACRA annual report. I believe, Michael, you're doing this for us?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good morning and good morning, members. I simply ask the committee to receive this report and to ask questions if they wish to. I gave a thorough account of the work of the SACRA a year ago, and what I've given this, as the introduction this morning is a much briefer version, which you'll be relieved about perhaps. The Standing Advisory Council is a statutory body, a committee of the local authority, and its report is also a statutory document. We have to produce a report every year. And this is why I'm inviting the County Council, as represented by this committee, to receive the report. The report goes out to all the schools, but it is a report to the County Council. It has a standardised format now, so that every SACRA in the country, every local authority is producing a report in exactly the same format. This means that it's possible now to collate the different activities that the SACRAs are doing across the country, and work is being done to compare this and to draw lessons from it. As people will be aware, the COVID virus is still affecting the work of schools, and therefore the last year has been quite a disruptive school year, as well as therefore the work of SACRA. It's made contact with schools erratic, and the mounting of courses difficult as well. And exam results continue to be unreliable in terms of being able to compare year or year in terms of religious education, both GCSEs and A-levels. During the year, we've had a successful revision of the agreed syllabus completed. This is the syllabus that is offered for use by all schools within the County Council's remit. That is both its own county community schools and also schools which are voluntary controlled with the Church of England Foundation. This agreed syllabus has now been authorised for use through the due process, which includes the final approval by the Cabinet member responsible. And the revised syllabus was launched at the beginning of February in a very successful meeting with over 100 people gathering together for the purpose, with a lot of interest and a considerable amount of buzz, if I can use that word, to welcome the new revision and to implement it in schools. The syllabus has to be implemented from September onwards, but schools are being invited to transition to this when they feel ready to do so. It is now the authorised syllabus, and the schools will be getting rid of the copies of the former syllabus that they had to replace it with this one. But it should be a simple transition because it builds on the previous syllabus, which was last revised and launched in 2016. I'd like to thank the County Council through this committee for the support it gives financially to the Advisory Council, and also for its hosting of the meetings of the council, the committee in this building. I have a flashback to around about 1990 or so, 1989, when Staffordshire Sacre first met as an authorised statutory body. And it met in the Oak Room, I think, with a chair who was placed on a much higher edifice for the purpose. And it was quite a formal meeting, and it's strange rather to come back into these buildings after those decades and to have this formality again, which is not all that conducive to collaborative work. Which is the style of the Sacre meetings. But we're very grateful that we have the venue provided to save some money on the budget that we have. There are some appendices to the report which give an account of attendance at meetings. County councillors on the Sacre are prominent by their visibility on that report, and also to note that there are a number of gaps in the constituencies that can contribute to the membership of the Sacre. And there's also a mention in my covering introduction to the white paper. Things have moved on since I wrote that introduction, of course. The white paper has lapsed as a document which the government is working on. But we're very well aware that the momentum to move schools into academies continues, and therefore this raises a question about the role of Sacre going on into the future. Because it is a statutory body, there is the likelihood that the government will not want to introduce a new statute simply to get rid of Sacres. It's more likely that the government will find a use for Sacres into the future. So we look forward to seeing what that will be. But at the moment, we're expecting that the current statutory work that we do will dwindle as more and more schools become academies. On the other hand, of course, we are a resource that can be used by academies and to help some sense of cohesion among the schools within the county as we go forward. So I commend the report to the members of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions? No. Sorry, David. Need to be quick.
Could I just ask, it may be really a side issue from what we've got within the report, but I just wondered in education today, I think particularly as far as primary education is concerned, what the feeling is of teachers and also parents to the religious education within the school.
As far as I can answer that with actual evidence, we have no evidence that the syllabus that is being offered causes any problems for the children or for the parents of the children. It's very much in line with the pattern that's developing within the country as a whole, which is that there's a diversity of stances when it comes to personal religious belief or non-belief, and the syllabus is not designed to, in any sense, proselytize or to convert or to put forward any particular worldview or faith view as being the preferred one or the one which is being presented. It offers a range of opportunities for children to encounter faith and non-faith and to explore what it means to belong to communities of one kind and another, and therefore to prepare them for their adult lives within our community. Parents should have access to the syllabus of RE that their schools are using. They should know what it is, and they have the right to complain or to make representations if they wish to. We are not aware of any representations from parents. Thank you.
Philippa?
If I may just to answer David, my children at a school at C of E and enjoy the curriculum that's presented to them. They enjoy participating when appropriate, worship at the local church. Prior to that, they were at a school that didn't do that, and it's a marked difference. The teachers at the primary schools also take a lead on religious education and different subjects, and it's delivered with passion from what I can tell as a parent.
Nobody else? I'm happy that to accept the 2 recommendations, that we formally received this report and we've managed to raise any questions. And I'm also happy that the report contributes to achieving the ambition of promoting religious education, but also takes into consideration what you've just said around the debate for fuller inclusion of non-religious beliefs as well. So thank you, Michael. Can I have a proposer to accept that report? Graham, David to second. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for your time. We'll move quickly on. Work programme. Jonathan.
Thanks, Chairman. Right, this is your last or the final meeting of this municipal year. For the next year, I've put together an indicative work programme which is included in the pack. If I could just bring members' attention to the proposal to use the Wednesday the 7th of June slot as an informal work programme planning session, and then Friday the 2nd of June as the work programme planning session, and then another formal meeting on Wednesday the 7th of June in the afternoon for a business meeting. Since I put together the schedule, Chairman, I've heard that the residential overnight education item, which is down as number 2, would like to be moved to the July meeting if possible. And that's the only change, Chairman, so if you're happy.
Yeah, happy with that. And we're happy that the 2nd of June is the work programme planning that we do every year. Philippa?
My apologies for the 2nd of June, if I can, please.
Okay, if you do have anything in particular, though, make sure it gets to us. Graham?
As long as it doesn't overrun, because I've got to go to London shortly afterwards.
Well, whatever time you can give us, Graham, will be greatly appreciated. Anybody else? Are we all happy with that? So 2nd of June, work programme planning, when we get the people like Darryl in to come and tell us what's going on and what they've got planned and what they think we should be doing, and then we take it on board and decide if we want to scrutinise it. And then obviously the 7th of June, we'll start with the business end and get on with the year ahead. As it is the last meeting, I want to thank you all for your time, for your input into the meetings, to also thank Jonathan, because he puts up with a hell of a lot when I keep phoning him and telling him, asking him to change things, when cabinet members say, I can't do that meeting, I need to do this meeting, when reports get put back by officers. So he puts everything together and makes sure that we've got an agenda. From me as your chairman for now, we don't know what's going to happen after May, but hopefully it might still be me here.
Are we rolling over? I mean, I appreciate Chair might be. Are we continuing in this committee?
That is in the gift of the leader, Graham, not me.
Right.
So he may make changes, he may not. Hopefully it'll stay the same. So thank you very much, everybody. Obviously, the next meeting is the 2nd of June, and I thank you all for your attendance this morning, and safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.